There are moments in life when heaven interrupts the ordinary, when God speaks not to tease you, but to prepare you. I came to tell someone tonight that you are not standing at the end of your story, you are standing at the edge of a divine turn. God said, before December 18, four things will happen, and they will not be subtle. They will not be hidden. They will be undeniable. This is not about hype. This is about timing. You've been asking, Lord, how long? And God answers, long enough to qualify you. I remember seasons in my own life when it felt like nothing was moving, yet everything was shifting. On the surface, it looked quiet, but in the spirit, God was rearranging systems, rerouting people, and recalibrating my capacity. You must understand this delay is often disguise. What you thought was God withholding was actually God protecting you from arriving too early to a blessing you weren't ready to sustain. Before December 18, the first thing that will happen is divine alignment. Things that have been out of order will suddenly make sense. Conversations will happen without effort. Doors will open without begging. You won't have to explain yourself the way you used to, because God is aligning you with people who recognize your value without persuasion. When alignment comes, struggle leaves. When alignment comes, confusion breaks. When alignment comes, you stop forcing what God has already favored. The second thing that will happen is exposure. And don't panic when I say that, because exposure is not punishment, it's preparation. God is about to uncover what has been working against you behind the scenes. Things you couldn't prove, God will reveal. Motives you couldn't confront, God will expose. And at the same time, He will expose you, not in shame, but in visibility. You will be seen by the right eyes at the right time for the right reason. What was hidden will no longer be overlooked. Third, there will be a release. I'm talking about release from cycles, from burdens, from agreements you didn't even know you made, an exhaustion and fear. Some of you have been carrying weights that were never assigned to you. You've been emotionally overdrawn, spiritually fatigued, mentally stretched. But before December 18, God is saying, put it down. What you release determines what you can receive. You cannot carry yesterday's pain into tomorrow's promise. And the fourth thing that will happen is elevation, not just positionally, but internally. Your confidence will rise. Your discernment will sharpen. Your tolerance for dysfunction will decrease. Elevation doesn't always mean a new title. Sometimes it means a new standard. You will no longer negotiate with what drains you. You will no longer beg for what God has already approved. But hear me clearly, prophetic moments demand personal participation. God speaks, but you must respond. Faith without movement is just inspiration. You must shift your language, shift your posture, shift your expectation. Stop preparing for survival and start preparing for stewardship. Stop asking, what if it doesn't work? And start declaring, what if this is the moment everything changes? I want you to see it like standing at the edge of a Red Sea with nothing but a word and a staff. Fear behind you, promise in front of you. And God says, move forward, not when the waters part, but so that the waters will part. Obedience is the trigger for miracles. So tonight I call you to action. Lift your expectation, clean your atmosphere, speak life over your days leading up to December 18. Get up every morning with authority in your voice and vision in your spirit. You are not waiting on God, God is waiting on you. This is your moment of convergence, where prayer meets promise, where faith meets fulfillment, where timing meets obedience. And when it happens, you will look back and say, if God had done it any earlier, I would have missed the weight of it. But now you're ready. There are moments when we confuse God's silence with absence, when we assume that because nothing is moving visibly, nothing is happening spiritually. But divine timing is never random and never late. God does not operate on urgency, He operates on precision. What feels like delay to you is often strategy in heaven. If God rushed you into what you asked for, it could crush you instead of crown you. He waits not because he is withholding, but because he is refining your capacity to carry what is coming. Think about how many times you prayed for something and later realized that if it had happened when you wanted it, you would not have survived it. The people you didn't meet yet, the strength you hadn't developed, the wisdom you hadn't earned, God saw all of that. He understands that blessings require structure. Elevation without maturity creates collapse. So God uses time as a tool, not a punishment. He stretches seasons so that your roots grow deeper than your desires. There is a divine calendar that does not respond to panic, pressure, or comparison. Just because someone else is moving does not mean you are behind. You are not late, you are loading. Heaven does not rush harvest. It waits until the fruit is fully formed. And what you are about to step into requires discernment, stamina, and authority, not just excitement. That is why God allowed the process to take longer than you expected. Every closed door you questioned, every not yet that frustrated you, every moment you felt overlooked was actually God positioning you for precision. When God releases something at the right time, it doesn't need force. It doesn't need manipulation. It arrives with clarity and confirmation. When it is God's timing, peace accompanies movement, not anxiety. So stop measuring your progress by the clock of others. Stop apologizing for a pace God ordained. You are not delayed, you are synchronized. And when the moment comes, you will realize that nothing was wasted, nothing was accidental, and nothing was missing. Everything aligned exactly when it needed to because God never acts late. He acts last, so no one else can take the credit. There is always resistance just before acceleration. What you've been pushing against is not a sign that you're going the wrong way. It's proof that you're close to breaking through something that has never been challenged at your level before. Pressure intensifies when purpose is near. The enemy doesn't waste energy on what isn't a threat, and opposition doesn't rise unless movement is imminent. The friction you feel is the sound of systems shifting to make room for you. You have to understand that resistance is often the final test of resolve. It exposes whether you will retreat, compromise, or rise with greater authority. Many people turn back right before the breakthrough because the weight becomes uncomfortable. But discomfort is often the doorway to expansion. Muscles don't grow without resistance, and neither does faith. What feels heavy is actually strengthening you for the speed that's coming next. I've seen seasons where everything seemed to push back at once. Finances, relationships, clarity, even confidence. It felt like trying to move forward through mud. But looking back, I realized that season built endurance, discipline, and discernment. Acceleration without control would have caused destruction. So God allowed resistance to teach you how to govern momentum before he releases it. The very areas where you've experienced the most pushback are the areas about to move the fastest. The battle revealed the blessing. The struggle exposed the significance. And the fact that you're still standing, still believing, still pressing tells me you're already qualified for the next dimension. You didn't quit when it was hard, and that perseverance has positioned you for sudden movement. When acceleration comes, it comes quickly. Doors open in clusters. Answers arrive back opportunities collide in ways that only God could orchestrate. What took years to build will begin to move in months, even weeks. But acceleration is dangerous without stability, and God made sure you were anchored before he increased the speed. So don't resent the resistance. It was not sent to stop you, it was sent to strengthen you. You are not stuck, you are braced. And when God releases the acceleration, you will move with confidence, clarity, and control, knowing that what once pushed against you could no longer hold you back. What God releases in a season must be met with a response because heaven moves in partnership, not in isolation. Divine promises are activated when human obedience meets divine intention. You can hear a word, agree with it emotionally, and still miss its manifestation if you refuse to move. Faith is not passive belief. Faith is responsive alignment. It shifts how you speak, how you decide, and how you act under pressure. There are moments when God is waiting to see if you will step, when there is no visible guarantee. Obedience often looks unreasonable before it looks rewarding. It asks you to forgive when you want to protect, to give when you want to save, to move when you want to wait for certainty. But certainty is rarely given before movement. God reveals the next step, not the whole staircase, because faith grows through trust, not control. Your results are shaped by your response to instruction. Two people can hear the same word and experience completely different outcomes based on what they do next. One prepares, adjusts, and moves with expectation. The other delays, analyzes, and waits for perfect conditions. But perfect conditions never come to those who require them. Momentum belongs to those who act in obedience, not those who negotiate with fear. I've learned that hesitation can be as costly as disobedience. Missed timing doesn't always come from rebellion. Sometimes it comes from delay. God's windows open and close, and when he gives instruction, it is often time sensitive. That is why obedience must be immediate, not convenient. Every act of obedience sharpens your spiritual perception and increases your authority to steward more. Your response also reveals what you truly believe. If you say you trust God but refuse to release control, your actions contradict your confession. Faith speaks loudly, but obedience speaks louder. When you move in alignment with what God has spoken, you create space for supernatural intervention. God responds to motion. He multiplies what is placed in his hands, not what is hidden in fear. So shift from intention to execution. Align your habits with your prayers. Let your daily decisions agree with the future you are believing for. When you respond with obedience, expectation, and courage, you position yourself for results that cannot be explained by effort alone, but only by the undeniable partnership between God's word and your willingness to move. There comes a moment when God no longer speaks to you as a survivor, but as a ruler. Survival asks, how do I get through this? Dominion asks, how do I govern what I've been given? Many people are praying to escape while God is calling them to take responsibility. The shift from survival to dominion is not about having more, it's about becoming more. It's the internal upgrade that allows you to carry authority without arrogance and confidence without fear. When you live in survival mode, every decision is reactive. You tolerate dysfunction because you're afraid of loss. You shrink your voice to keep peace. You settle for crumbs because you're grateful to still be standing. But dominion changes your posture. Dominion understands that you were not just rescued, you were restored. You were not just delivered, you were deputized. God didn't bring you this far to keep you dependent. He brought you this far to make you decisive. I remember realizing that God was no longer comforting me. In certain seasons, he was challenging me. The grace that once covered my weakness began to confront my hesitation. That was the sign of elevation. When God expects more from you, it means he trusts what he placed within you. Dominion requires stewardship, and stewardship demands maturity. You can't manage territory you're still afraid to occupy. Authority begins with expectation. What you expect, you permit. What you tolerate, you authorize. When you shift into dominion, your standards rise. You stop negotiating with what drains you and start enforcing boundaries that protect your purpose. You don't wait for permission to walk in obedience. You move with clarity because you know who sent you. Dominion also requires bold speech. Life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who walk in authority speak with intention. You stop rehearsing defeat and start declaring alignment. You speak to environments, not just about them. You don't beg circumstances to change. You command order because you understand the authority backing your voice. This is the season where God transitions you from coping to commanding, From hoping to enforcing, from barely making it to boldly taking ground. You are not stepping into pride, you are stepping into position. And when you embrace dominion, you stop asking if God is with you and start moving, knowing that heaven responds to the authority you now carry. There is a sound that comes from a person who has decided to fully agree with God, and it is not timid, apologetic, or uncertain. It is the sound of authority. This is where alignment becomes activation. You are no longer just inspired by the word, you are governed by it. What God has spoken begins to dictate your choices, your pace, and your posture. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally because revelation has replaced confusion. At this stage, distractions lose their power. What once pulled at your emotions no longer controls your direction. You begin to recognize when something is good but not God, available but not assigned. Discernment sharpens because intimacy has deepened. You are no longer asking everyone for advice. You are listening for instruction. When God speaks, clarity settles in your spirit, even if the path still requires courage. This is also where separation becomes necessary. Not everyone who walked with you in one season is authorized to walk with you in the next. Dominion demands discernment in relationships, environments, and commitments. You cannot rule effectively while being emotionally entangled with what God has already asked you to release. Obedience sometimes requires solitude before it produces influence. As you move forward, your confidence is no longer rooted in outcomes, but in obedience. Even when results are still forming, you remain steady because you know you are aligned. Peace becomes your confirmation. You don't rush, you don't panic, and you don't compete. You understand that what God has for you does not need to be chased, it needs to be stewarded. Momentum begins to build quietly at first. Small confirmations, unexpected favor, timely conversations. You recognize the fingerprints of God in details others would overlook. This is how heaven signals that you are on course. You don't need applause, you need alignment. And alignment always attracts provision, protection, and precision. What once felt heavy now feels focused. What once felt confusing now feels ordered. You are not striving, you are advancing. And as you continue to walk in obedience, your life becomes evidence that when a person fully submits to divine authority, they don't just survive seasons, they shape them. Now comes the moment where faith must be spoken with conviction and lived with consistency. This is not the time for quiet agreement or private belief. This is the time for public alignment. When you open your mouth in faith, you are not informing God of what he already knows. You are declaring your agreement with what heaven has decided. Words are containers, and whatever you consistently speak is what you give permission to manifest around you. There is a difference between hopeful language and authoritative language. Hope says, I wish it would change. Authority says it must change. When you understand that God's word carries power, you stop using your mouth to describe the problem and start using it to enforce the promise. You speak life into dry places, order into chaos, and clarity into confusion. Your voice becomes an instrument of alignment, not a record of frustration. But declaration without discipline is noise. Faith must be reinforced by daily obedience. What you declare in prayer must be supported by what you tolerate in your life. You cannot speak abundance and live in disorder. You cannot declare peace while feeding chaos. Consistency is the proof of belief. When your habits align with your confession, your faith gains traction. There will be moments when what you say contradicts what you see. That is not denial, that is dominion. You are not lying, you are legislating. You are calling things that are not as though they were, because you trust the authority of the word over the evidence of the moment. Faith does not wait for confirmation, it creates it. As you stand in this place of conviction, resistance may rise one last time, but you will not shrink back because your confidence is no longer in feelings, it is in truth. You speak even when your voice shakes. You stand even when support is scarce. And heaven responds to that kind of faith because it reflects trust, not convenience. So live what you declare. Speak with intention. Move with consistency. Let your life echo the word you believe. When faith is spoken boldly and walked out daily, it doesn't just inspire, it transforms environments, shifts outcomes, and marks seasons with undeniable evidence of God's power at work. There is a moment when you realize that this season is not just about personal breakthrough, but about divine demonstration. God is not only changing your circumstances, He is establishing you as evidence. Evidence that obedience works, evidence that patience produces power, evidence that alignment invites acceleration. Your life becomes a living testimony, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is purposeful. When God elevates you, it is never just for you. It is so that others can see what happens when faith meets discipline and trust meets action. People will begin to ask how doors opened, how peace remained, how clarity came so quickly. And you will know it was not luck, not manipulation, not connections. It was obedience at the right time. God will use your journey to remind others that His word still stands and His timing is still accurate. You will notice a shift in how people respond to you. Your presence will carry weight, not because you demand it, but because authority has been cultivated in private. What you practiced in hidden seasons now shows up in public moments. Integrity becomes your influence. Consistency becomes your credibility. You won't need to announce what God has done. Your life will quietly declare it. This is also where responsibility increases. Greater influence requires greater discipline. God entrusts visibility to those who can handle accountability. You will become more intentional with your time, your words, and your choices because you understand that your life is now a message. You don't just represent yourself, you represent the faith you profess and the God you serve. And even as blessings increase, humility will deepen. You will remember the nights of waiting, the seasons of silence, the moments of stretching. Gratitude will guard your heart. You will move with confidence, but not entitlement, with boldness, but not pride, because you know that everything you carry was entrusted, not earned. In this place, your life stops being a question and starts being an answer to prayer, an answer to doubt, an answer to those who wondered if obedience was worth it. And through you, God will remind the world that when a person fully aligns with Him, their life becomes a sign that transformation is not just possible, it is inevitable. As this season unfolds, you will sense an urgency, not a frantic one, but a focused urgency that sharpens your priorities. You will become acutely aware that time is no longer something to waste or postpone with indecision. Moments will matter more. Choices will carry greater weight. You will feel a holy pressure to move with intention because you recognize that this is a window, and windows are meant to be stepped through, not stared at. What once felt optional will now feel essential. You will no longer have the appetite for distractions that drain energy without producing fruit, conversations that go nowhere, commitments that pull you off course, habits that keep you busy but unfulfilled. These will begin to lose their appeal. Not because you are trying harder, but because your vision has become clearer. When purpose sharpens, excess falls away naturally. You will also notice an increase in spiritual sensitivity. You will discern when to speak and when to stay silent, when to move and when to wait. This sensitivity is not fear based, it is wisdom based. It comes from walking closely with God and learning to recognize His timing. You will stop forcing outcomes and start cooperating with instruction. That shift alone will save you years of unnecessary struggle. There may be moments when obedience feels costly. You may have to walk away from familiar patterns, comfortable spaces, or relationships that no longer align with where God is taking you. But even in those moments, there will be an inner assurance that you are not losing, you are gaining clarity. God never removes without replacing, and what He replaces always carries greater purpose. As focus intensifies, courage will rise. You will do things you once postponed, because fear no longer has the final say. You will make decisions with confidence, not because every risk is gone, but because trust has grown. You understand now that hesitation can be more dangerous than movement, and obedience is safer than delay. This season will teach you to value momentum. Small steps taken in faith will produce compounding results. You will look back and realize that the progress you once prayed for began the moment you stopped waiting for perfect conditions and started responding to clear instruction. And in that realization, you will understand that divine opportunity does not announce itself loudly. It responds to those who are ready to move when God speaks.